So the DfE set out its draft climate strategy recently, and they are aiming to review training to ensure all teachers are equipped to deliver a knowledge-rich curriculum and improve climate education. So my guest today, Andrew Lochery, has some thoughts on teaching climate change. So Andrew was a science teacher up until he left the classroom in 2020 to run his science education company, APLEducation. So Andrew has also written articles for TES about science and has created content for several major publishers and some smaller education companies as well. Let's get to the interview. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the Teachers Podcast today.
Good morning, Claire. Thanks for having me on.
So you've got me out of a hole. You've come in at the last minute and you're going to talk about something amazing, climate change. I think it's so important to talk about right now.
Very big topic, very key to talk about it, yes.
So then, I'm sure that most teachers have heard of climate change. In fact, probably every teacher has. But how would you describe it to a teacher that's never heard of it before? Maybe based on a teaching point of view as well.
So climate change is a massive issue, and it's basically what's happening to the world now. And we can see all around us things that are happening that weren't happening before. So things like increased flooding, increased droughts, very big forest fires in Australia and America. They're becoming much more frequent, and it's because the climate is literally changing, because it's heating up. So it's the world that's heating up, the temperature's going up. It's gone up by about 1.2 degrees in the last 100 years. And if that continues, we will get more and more extreme weather events. So we know it's happening. It's all around us. We can see it. It's what do we do about it to stop it, to limit it?
Yeah, it's just such a big thing, I think, for teachers to talk about as well. So why is it important for teachers to teach children about climate change then?
So first of all, I think it's very important to teach children about the terms. There's a lot of terms associated with this that get very confused. So things like greenhouse gases, global warming, climate change, they're all sort of interlinked, and it's very clear that we say to children exactly the science behind what is going on that is leading to climate change. So you can think of climate change as the overall effect at the end of the day. So that's why we can see climate change causing flooding, causing increased amounts of forest fires, causing temperatures that are like in the 40 degrees in Europe, which is very unusual. It's caused by global warming. So we'd have to go back a step and what is global warming and why does that happen? And before we can do that, we'd have to think about greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect. So if we can just clearly explain it to the teachers, maybe they're not as familiar with science, but basically we need greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We need them because they trap heat energy inside the earth and they warm it up. And without that, life would not exist. Our earth would be much colder than it is now, so we wouldn't exist. So we need to have greenhouse gases. And that effect is called the greenhouse effect. So that naturally keeps the earth warm, and that's really, really good. What's happening, though, is we're increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that's causing something called global warming. So it's causing the temperature of the Earth to rise much faster than it would normally. And that is the big problem. And it's that global warming that's leading to climate change. So for people that are not familiar, I talk about greenhouse gases as a blanket, really. In the winter, we need a blanket around us to keep us warm, to keep the cold away from us so we feel nice and cozy. But if our blankets or our duvet's too thick, then we get really, really hot and we kick it off. And that's what's happening to the Earth. It's being kept too warm. And so we need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases we're emitting into the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like, I've not taught this before, but often we say greenhouse gases and we think that's bad, but you're saying it's not necessarily bad.
They are essential. A lot of people don't know and don't realise that water vapour makes up a huge proportion of the greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide makes up a smaller amount, and then we have gases like methane. And the problem is that methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. And because we're doing other things to cause warming effects on the Earth, we're now releasing more greenhouse gases like methane from the Arctic tundra, for example, and that's heating the Earth even more. Methane's released by cows, for example, when they're digesting food. So eating a lot of meat means that a lot of cows are producing methane gas into the atmosphere, and that's a much more potent gas than carbon dioxide. But traditionally, it is the use of fossil fuels and the release of carbon dioxide that is causing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to tip over a point where it's just increasing the temperature of the Earth much more quickly than it should be, and we've got to limit that.
Yeah. I've read that about cows recently, and I think what you're saying really is that we need this reset of how we're teaching it and making sure that we're teaching it more seriously, because it's becoming not more real, but the effects are going to be sooner.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think 30, 40 years ago, when we realised this could be a problem, the science was a bit more sketchy, and there was people arguing that, oh, well, this is just part of a natural cycle. But then there were other scientists saying, no, we've got to take this extremely seriously. Over the last sort of 20, 30 years, we've not really acted that much. And now the science is just totally on board that this is going to be potentially a catastrophe that's going to happen within like the next 10, 20, 30 years, not like 100 years away. So it's an issue that we have to tackle now. Scientists say that we only have a few years to actually drastically change our habits before it's too late. And it's not just carbon dioxide we're increasing in the atmosphere, it's something called feedback loops. This is something to do with tipping points. So we can actually tip over this cause of releasing greenhouse gases that will cause other things to like the Arctic to melt, releasing methane gas, and we have no control over releasing those gases. So we will go past what we call a tipping point where it just runs away.
Late.
Yeah, it's too late. So we've got a chance to change it still, but we have to take drastic action now.
Yeah. So, at the beginning you were talking about like climate change is kind of the end result, and going back and talking about greenhouse gases. Do you feel like, in our curriculums in school, then we should be sort of going even further back and talking in more detail about, I don't know, for example, cows as one kind of mini topic, and then talking about all the different ways we're contributing to climate change?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's things that children can relate to, and we need to use those hooks to get them involved and really thinking about climate change very seriously. So it is about how much meat do we consume, because the more cows we have on the planet, the more dairy that we eat, the more things that are associated with farming, then that has an impact on how much greenhouse gases are being released into the atmosphere. So if we reduce our meat consumption, then there'll be less cattle releasing less amounts of methane gas, and so we will be doing something positive to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases being released into the atmosphere. I mean, scientists are also coming up with schemes to actually reduce this. So, for example, it's a particular enzyme in cows that release the methane, so they're trying to breed cows that don't have this enzyme, and therefore, when they do digest their food, it doesn't release as much methane as a cow would normally. So there's multiple ways of tackling this. Telling children about you could walk to school rather than getting mum or dad to take you in the car. I mean, a 5-minute car journey could be like a 10-15 minute walk. And so you have health benefits, and you also have environmental benefits because you're not releasing that carbon dioxide that you would have done if you took the car. So it's it's things that are very easy to take if we're conscious about what's happening and what we're trying to stop, and we're trying to limit the amount of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's almost like this is so important, it's trying to embed it into everything, isn't it?
Yeah, it has to be a whole world approach. It's not just us, it's everybody that can make a difference. And it's just small things we can do. We can put pressure on our government to take much bigger and drastic action, but we can also help ourselves by using our own methods. So, for example, I got rid of my car in the summer, so we went down to a 1-car household. And for me, I'm walking everywhere now, and I feel so much better for doing it. And I know that I don't need to take the car to, say, drop my son off at football. I can walk him there. I can walk and get the children from school. So we don't need to use the things around us all the time. It's not to say we shouldn't have them, but it's just to be mindful about when we're using them and when we don't have to use them.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. Recycling is something that's big for me, and I'm like, oh, why is there so much packaging and that kind of thing. We're going down to one car. We've got an electric car and we've got a petrol car, but we are selling the petrol car because apparently they're really wanted at the moment.
Make the most of it. It might be worthless in 10 years' time.
Well, this is exactly it. Now, whether we'll get another electric car in time, I don't know, because the school's quite far away. But it's these things that we do need to be thinking about. You're right. So why are you so passionate about this then? Because obviously, I think we're both passionate about it. But go on, tell me.
I'm really passionate about it because I think that maybe 10 years ago, I was sort of thinking, well, I want to do something to help the environment. I want to reduce greenhouse gases, but everyone around me seems to think that this is a problem that's going to be something big in 20, 30, 40 years' time. There wasn't that immediate sort of, this is an actual emergency. This is a disaster waiting to happen. And over the last few years, I've seen a lot of my friends and a lot of people around me thinking, well, this isn't not really something that's going to affect me. This is something that is going to happen in 50, 60 years' time, won't be around. So why should I be really that concerned? I want to enjoy my life. But having children really changed my perspective on things, because now you've got to think about the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And we are custodians of the earth. We are not here to plunder the earth and then leave everything in an absolutely terrible way. We've got to think about our children, and we've got to think about we're just basically renting the earth for 70, 80 years' time. We don't actually own anything here. We'll take nothing away from it. But we have to leave it in a condition that our future generations will be able to build on the good work that we've done. And so we have the technology to be able to limit some of these greenhouse gas emissions. We have things like carbon capture that will take greenhouse emissions out of the atmosphere. But the biggest thing that we can do is to change our mindset, and we can change what we're doing in everyday life. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I think everyone can contribute. It's a problem that affects everybody, but everyone is part of the solution. And the more we put pressure on our politicians, like Greta Thunberg, she's done a brilliant job to make everyone aware of the science. She's not said this research the science. She's just picked up on the science that it's really overwhelming, that we've got a massive problem. And she's woken up lots of people on Earth to think, yes, this is a massive problem. We now need to wake up our governments and say, it's not something you want to treat in 10 years, 20 years, oh, we'll get to like net zero 2050. It's like, we've got to get to net zero, say, in the next 10 years, not in like 40 years or 30 years. It's something really much more immediate. We need to take action. And I think the more we teach children about the consequences of climate change, the more we teach them about the things that they can actually do to change the course that we are ploughing at the moment. It's not the end. We don't have everything in place where catastrophe is guaranteed. We've still got time to actually limit these greenhouse gas emissions, and actually we can pull it back from the brink.
And it's about being more mindful in general, isn't it? Because it's not just about climate change. There's all the other elements of, I suppose you could say, sustainability as well, that we just need to be mindful of and be thinking about. And we can't do everything, but even things like, it stresses me out how much we use pesticides, how much we use plastic, and this is all contributing, isn't it, to this just big mess.
Exactly. You mentioned plastics before. I mean, scientists came up with this wonderful invention, plastics. There's so many different types of plastics, but we didn't really think about, okay, if we fill the world with plastics, then what happens? And now we're seeing the effects of it in the oceans and how it's affecting wildlife that live there, and they're swallowing little microscopic bits of plastic, and it's just affecting like the whole food chain. It's affecting the environment, and we really didn't intend for this to happen. But we didn't think about the consequences carefully enough of, if we roll this out on a mass scale, what actually are the effects of it. And that's what we're dealing with now.
And also, I don't think we knew some of those as well. Like where possible, I try and store food in glass and wooden containers, because I don't think many people know, but like plastic, it releases hormones. It's really not good for you. It's really not good for you. There's so many issues with it.
But there's shops popping up where you can just take your own container into that shop. You can fill up whatever you need, and then you take it home. And so there's no need for a single-use plastic. And so the more that we do that, the more we shop local. We don't travel really far for our goods. We go and use shops that are really trying to benefit the environment by reducing plastic. Then we're doing our bit, and that's another thing that we can do. And it won't take us much to be able to have an impact by doing something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so you're a teacher listening and you're thinking, wow, Clive and Andrew are really passionate.
Really, I could speak for hours and hours about this.
But you're listening and you're thinking, okay, so can you give me some ideas of little things I could do just to set me off on the journey? What 3 actionable steps have you got that teachers can start to use or do to teach their pupils about climate change now?
So I think it needs to be a daily or a weekly thing that you do to remind the children about climate change and how they can have a positive impact, because they will go home and they will have a positive impact on their parents. And then we sort of start this ripple effect where everyone's aware of the science, everyone's aware of what's happening, and we are consciously thinking about ways that we will reduce our impact. So children tell their parents, can we walk to school rather than take the car? Can we walk to the shops and pick up some food rather than taking the car down the road to the shops? Yes, it takes a bit longer, but it's much more beneficial for the environment. It's things like reducing the amount of meat that we eat. So children can have an effect on their parents. They ask them, okay, what do you want for food this tonight or this week? Let's think, can we cut out 1 meal of meat a week? Just small little steps. And small little steps add up to much, much bigger changes. I would say teachers can help children, say, write letters to their MP or write letters to Boris Johnson saying how passionately they feel about climate change and how they don't want a world that is absolutely wrecked, where civilization has changed beyond any measure of what we recognise now. They want their politicians to act. They want their adults that are supposed to be much more wise and knowledgeable than them to actually take action and to change the course. They want to follow Greta, so they want to listen to a young voice that's sort of speaking the truth. She's bringing in the science. She's not just coming up with some crazy theory. Science is about evidence. We look for evidence. We make theories based on evidence. And the science is clear. It's not 100% that catastrophe will happen, but it's a likely possibility at this current point in time if we continue on the trajectory we're going. So if we can limit climate, global temperatures rising, we have a chance to stave off the absolute worst effects of climate change.
Yeah, it's instilling a habit, isn't it, for when they get older, that they're going to be thinking about this kind of thing and being able to take steps, because nobody's going to be able to do everything. No. But the more we can all do the small things, it's really going to add up, isn't it?
But the COVID pandemic, if it's taught us anything, is that mass change in behaviour can happen if the will is there. And because COVID was such an immediate threat to, say, the NHS, we all took the advice that we were told, stay indoors, stop our mixing, to protect other people. We could argue that climate change is going to have an even worse effect than 5-10 million people dying from a virus. This could be hundreds of millions. This could be billions of people. We might not be able to feed our own population in 20-30 years' time. Whole countries like the Maldives could be underwater and absolutely don't exist anymore. There'll be people moving from different places on Earth because they can't live in 40-50 degree temperatures. So you have mass migration. If we think we've got a problem with migrating people now, we'll have an even bigger problem. So it's in all our interest to actually act now.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is when COVID, for example, you feel, obviously you can't necessarily see it, but you feel like it's imminent. So it's, I suppose, easier to kind of follow, I suppose you could say, the guidelines. But I think about this quite a bit, especially from a business perspective, because that's how my mind works.
Yeah.
But the problem is convenience. We have got used to so much convenience, and we want convenience, and it's how we present affordable convenience that doesn't involve some of the things that we're used to. Because I've switched to a milkman because I get it in glass bottles. They've got this tiny bit of foil to recycle, and I love that. But obviously it is more expensive, so trying to work out how we're going to do it. Like, how do we have takeaways where they're going to come in glass and wood containers that then we can return or they pick up? How is that all going to work? But we need to start thinking about it.
Well, I think where there's problems, there's definitely money to be made from solutions. So if someone does come up with a really good solution to that problem, then that business is going to be absolutely flying. Just think about, say, the plastic packaging, like the milk bottles that were in the Tetra Packs and things like that. That became a revolutionary idea. Now we need another revolutionary idea. So I think it's the same for businesses. We need to be sort of minded as what is the changes that could occur in the future? How can we drive those changes? How can we innovate where we are actually leading our consumers to a more sustainable future, a better future for the environment, but also we're actually making a business from it? So, I mean, no business overnight is going to ditch something that's in demand and they're selling a product, but there is scope to lead and forge a new path.
Yeah, I completely agree. Right, okay, so where can we find out more about you?
So I'm basically a former teacher that's left the classroom now, and I've gone and run my business full time. It's called Green Apple Education, and you could find us at www.greenappleeducation.co.uk. And we've launched a really exciting new brand that's aimed at young people, about 9 to 12-year-olds, and we're looking at bringing resources to them that actually will help them find out about current scientific issues. So I think part of the problem is that the science taught in the classroom is not always up to date. It's part of the Key Stage 2 curriculum. So at Phosphor, our brand, so it's www.phosphorescience.com. So it's a play on phosphorescence. So it's like a glowing brand to inspire young scientists into studying science and finding out more about science. And you can download these resources and use them in the classroom. They'll inspire young people to take care about the environment, about their health, about global warming, about climate change. And it will bring in current science into the classroom to supplement the Key Stage 2 curriculum.
Brilliant. Right, thank you so much. This has been such a good chat. I'm going to go away and think about using my glass more than my plastic.
Very good.
Drive my electric car a bit more. To be fair, we only use that car anyway, which is why we sell the other one. But I'm going to sell it this week.
Yes, I would definitely agree. You should sell it and then think more about, okay, yes, we've got a car, but do we actually need to use that car for every single journey that we go on? Could we walk? Could we go on public transport? Could we go for a bike ride? Could we do something different that will help our health as well as helping the environment?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Claire.